With all due respect, Ambassador Reyes, my delegation requires specific assurances regarding terraforming limitations. The Rigelian Trade Minister's voice synthesizer couldn't mask his irritation as his primary tentacles rippled with blue-black patterns of agitation. Elena maintained her diplomatic smile, knowing the Rigelian's visual receptors could detect micro-expressions. Minister Thrak, Terra has already committed to the 500-kilometer buffer zone your government requested. The Senate will not. The emergency comm unit on her wrist pulsed with a distinctive three-tone sequence that made her blood run cold. Priority Alpha. Assembly direct line. No one in the Terran diplomatic corps had received a Priority Alpha in 17 years. The Rigelian's skin flushed purple with indignation at the interruption. This negotiation is time-sensitive, Ambassador. Elena's assistant, Kaido, stepped smoothly forward. The minister requires immediate medical consultation. Human biological urgency. Our profound apologies. As security escorted the offended Rigelian delegation out, their tentacles coiling with unmistakable patterns of insult, Elena pressed her thumb against the comm unit's biometric reader. The holographic projection was brief and shockingly direct. Ambassador Elena Reyes, your presence is required 8 Neni Executus Station, Grand Invocation. Arrival within 72, Standardhurs mandatory. Diplomatic credentials transferable. Terra, Orientation Limited, to yourself alone. The projection vanished, leaving Elena staring at empty air. That's not possible, came Ambassador Cheng's voice from the doorway. Her superior's normally composed face was ashen. They'd never selected a junior representative for Grand Convocation. He held up his own comm unit. Everyone else received this. The second projection was even briefer. Ambassador, NAME, presence not required or PRMITTED 8 Grand Invocation. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the climate controls. Is this some kind of diplomatic insult? Sending the most junior ambassador alone? Cheng shook his head, his expression haunted. Worse, it's unprecedented. The Assembly doesn't break protocols established over millennia unless... He didn't finish. Unless what? Elena demanded. Unless something fundamental is about to change. He straightened his shoulders. Pack for at least 2 weeks. Take nothing that could be construed as technology beyond your diplomatic authenticator. I'll arrange immediate transport. That night, Elena methodically prepared her diplomatic attire. Neutral grays and blues designed by xenopsychologists to appear non-threatening across species with entirely different visual processing systems. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity had bent over backward to accommodate galactic sensibilities since achieving FTL travel, yet the Assembly still treated Earth's representatives as barely evolved primates who'd stumbled accidentally into the stars. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts, the habitat's environmental systems performing their nightly recalibration. But when the lights flickered and returned, Elena noticed something wrong immediately. The climate control panel displayed Terran Standard, rather than the diplomatic habitat's usual galactic common. She reached for the emergency comm, but every system in her quarters went dark before her fingers touched it. 10 seconds of absolute darkness followed before auxiliary power restored minimal lighting. On her primary terminal, a single line of text glowed. "TH, we are going to propose containment. Come prepared to fight for your species. All chances compromised." The message vanished, leaving no trace in the system logs. Security scans showed no breach, yet someone, or something, had bypassed the diplomatic quarters' isolation protocols to deliver a warning that made her hands tremble. Elena made one addition to her carefully packed diplomatic case, her great-grandfather's handwritten journal. Ambassador James Reyes had been among humanity's first contact specialists. his insights into cross-species communication legendary in diplomatic circles. The physical book, actual paper and binding, technology so archaic no modern scanning system flagged it, contained observations never uploaded to any database. "Prepare to fight for your species," she whispered, running her fingers over the worn leather cover. She'd never imagined those words would be anything but historical curiosity. Now, they felt like prophecy. "Trajectory anomaly detected. Calculating corrections," the ship's AI announced with the same pleasant tone it might use to offer refreshments. Captain Marquez's eyes told a different story as she burst into Elena's cabin. "Someone just tried to redirect us into CD Minor's gravity well. And I don't think it was an accident." Elena gripped the edge of her acceleration couch. "How is that possible? This is a diplomatic vessel. Exactly why it shouldn't be possible." Marquez's weathered face tightened. "Navigation's been manually overridden. We're diverting to the secondary Nexus approach. It'll add 6 hours, but we'll arrive alive." Elena finished. "Do we know who's responsible?" Marquez's pause spoke volumes. The signal originated from Nexus Station's traffic control. The replacement shuttle that collected them at the emergency rendezvous point was cramped and utilitarian, a far cry from the diplomatic vessel they'd been forced to abandon. Elena found herself wedged between a Tarjan diplomat whose exoskeleton kept jabbing her ribs and a pair of methane-breathing Pendari whose environment suits hissed continuously. Most telling was the conspicuous empty space around her. Every time she approached a group of diplomats, conversations halted. Translator units mysteriously malfunctioned. Environmental incompatibility was suddenly cited. Only when the shuttle executed a particularly rough maneuver did opportunity arise. A stocky Pendari trader crashed into her, apologizing profusely through his translator. As they disentangled, she felt something slip into her palm, a data crystal, no larger than her thumbnail. "Interference patterns are fascinating," the Pendari rumbled before shuffling away. Hours later, when her cabin's privacy field was active, Elena examined the crystal. Its surface bore no markings, but when she pressed it against her diplomatic authenticator, text scrolled across the display. CQRITEDIRECTIV 37X. Ifility GGD in URL patterns. Species. Human. TERA. Chila certification. Potentialidestabile. Ede. RECOMMENDEDHCHION. Monitoring and PATTER and suppression. Attached were brain scans, human neural activity compared with standardized models. The human patterns showed connections that had been highlighted in alarming red, connections that defied the Assembly's taxonomic predictions. Nexus Station loomed ahead. A vast, multi-dimensional structure where architecture itself was weaponized to make newcomer species feel insignificant. The central hub stretched 20 kilometers in diameter, while habitat rings extended outward in fractal patterns. Ancient 7 environmental domes crowned the structure like massive jewels, their otherworldly geometries declaring dominance without a word being spoken. Ambassador Reyes, enhanced security screening is required for your delegation. The docking officer's smile didn't reach his eyes. His species was humanoid enough that Elena could read the discomfort in his posture. "I am the delegation," she replied. 6 hours of humiliating molecular scans later, Elena emerged into the diplomatic reception area to find it deserted, except for a tall, silver-skinned figure leaning against a pillar. "You've caused quite the panic," Voros of the Mithril Concordat said quietly, his mercury-like skin rippling with subtle patterns that her translator didn't even attempt to interpret. Elena straightened her rumpled diplomatic uniform. "I wasn't aware junior human ambassadors warranted panic." "Follow me," Voros murmured. "Quickly. Station surveillance will register your processing completion in approximately 40 seconds." They slipped through a maintenance access panel that dilated at Voros's touch emerged into service corridors where non-sentient maintenance drones parted around them without acknowledgement. In his private chambers, a zero-gravity sphere filled with floating crystalline sculptures that sang softly when disturbed, Voros finally spoke freely. "The proposal isn't just quarantine," he said, activating a secure projection that showed classified assembly documents. "It includes provisions for cognitive stabilization of the human population." "Do you understand what that means, Alina?" She felt sick as the implications became clear. "They want to alter our brains. They fear what you might become." Voros gestured, and the projection shifted to show footage of human diplomats resolving conflicts between species with incompatible psychologies, humans adapting alien technologies in ways their creators never imagined. These successes have been systematically erased from official records. "Why are you helping me?" Alina demanded. Voros's silver skin darkened with what might have been emotion. "Because 6,000 years ago, my species was considerably more innovative than we are today. The underlevels aren't precisely forbidden," Voros explained, guiding Alina through maintenance shafts that grew increasingly dilapidated. "They're simply overlooked by convenience." The gleaming perfection of Nexus Station's diplomatic sectors gave way to a chaotic bazaar where the assembly's carefully maintained facade crumbled. Hundreds of species crowded makeshift stalls, trading goods, information, and services the pristine levels above pretended didn't exist. "Stay close," Voros cautioned. "Your neural signature is." A blur of motion cut him off as Alina was yanked sideways into a narrow passage. 4 articulated limbs held her immobile, while another pair worked frantically at a control panel. "Neural signature broadcasting like a beacon," chittered her captor, an arachnoid creature whose exoskeleton clicked with each movement. "They're tracking you across 17 spectrum bands." Alina struggled against the surprisingly strong grip. "Who are you?" "Trill, data broker. Friend of friends." The creature pressed a small device against Alina's temple before she could protest. Pain lanced through her skull, her vision briefly fragmenting into prismatic shards. Neural masking. Temporary. Uncomfortable. Necessary. When her vision cleared, they were in a cramped chamber lined with forbidden technology. Holographic displays flickered with data streams while scentless smoke spiraled from coolant vents. "Show her," Voros instructed. Trill's limbs danced across control surfaces, 17 human colonies, under active surveillance, without authorization. The displays flickered, showing hidden monitoring devices being installed in human habitats across 3 star systems. Alina recognized construction projects that had been attributed to infrastructure upgrades. These were authorized by Terra's own Security Council, she argued. "False credentials," Trill clicked. "Assembly penetration of your government. Deep. Systematic." The next displays showed something worse. Human prisoners in sterile chambers, their heads connected to equipment Alina didn't recognize. Their expressions were vacant, bodies occasionally twitching as though responding to unseen stimuli. "What am I looking at?" she whispered. "Cognitive pacification trials," Voros said quietly. "The Assembly has been testing methods to alter human neural architecture without killing the subject. Current models project 37% fatality in full implementation." Trill added with clinical detachment. "Considered acceptable loss ratio." Alina fought down nausea. "How did you get this information?" "I was monitoring Assembly security transmissions." Trill chittered. "Noticed anomalous resource allocation. Followed data trails. Found this." The final display showed simulation models of human brain development over generations after proposed adjustments were implemented. Each subsequent generation showed fewer neural connections, diminished cognitive flexibility, reduced capacity for intuitive leaps. "The Ancient Seven fear your kind's unpredictability," Trill explained, manipulating the display to show comparative scans. "Human brains form connections no predictive model can anticipate." A piercing alarm cut through the air, followed by rhythmic pounding from above. "Security raid." Trill's limbs blurred with motion. Data purge in progress. The ceiling burst inward, dropping armored figures into the chamber. Security violation. All entities remained stationary for processing. Elena felt a floor panel slide beneath her feet as Trill triggered some hidden mechanism. She dropped into darkness, landing hard on a cushioned surface before being pulled sideways by a grip that felt like living metal. "Not all of us fear humanity's potential," sang a crystalline voice as the being dragged her through pitch-black tunnels. Its body flowed like mercury, briefly illuminating their path with subtle bioluminescence. "I am Caleb. My ancestors' creativity was balanced for harmony 4,000 years ago." They emerged into a vast, abandoned hydroponics chamber where the lighting flickered erratically. 23 different species were gathered there, each showing evidence of hasty assembly. Some still wearing breathing apparatus, others shimmering within protective fields. "We've been monitoring your arrival," said a tall, insectoid being whose translucent carapace revealed pulsing internal organs. "Each of us represents a species that has experienced assembly guidance. We've gathered evidence, added a floating collective of gas-filled sacs that communicated through rhythmic contractions. But we need access to the sealed historical archives." "Why me?" Elena asked. "I'm the most junior human ambassador." "Because Caleb's crystalline form resonated. You were specifically chosen by the Assembly. That means something they fear is hiding within your mind. And that is exactly what we need." "The archives won't be easy to access." The floating gas collective pulsed in rhythmic speech. "They're quantum-locked to ancient 7 genetic signatures. Which is why we need you," added a small rodent-like being with 6 eyes that shifted independently. "Your neural activity creates unusual quantum effects that might bypass security." Elena looked around the abandoned hydroponics chamber at the unlikely coalition of species. "I'm a diplomat, not a thief." "It's not theft to access history that's been stolen from all of us." Caleb's crystalline form resonated. Their plan was audacious. Elena would pass through 7 security checkpoints, transferring her identity credentials to a different coalition member at each junction. The quantum-locked archives wouldn't register the subtle shift in biological signatures if the transition was seamless enough. Hours later, Elena stood inside the sealed historical archives, a vast repository where data was stored in crystalline lattices that spiraled throughout the chamber. The air itself felt charged with age and secrets. "We have 19 minutes before security rotations," whispered Voros through the comm unit Trill had modified. "Find the historical suppression patterns." Elena placed her palm against the primary interface. Her neural masker sent pulses through her nervous system, creating interference patterns that the archival system interpreted as authorized ancient 7 signatures. The system awakened, projected displays materializing around her like a forest of light. "Search parameters." The system inquired in a voice like rustling leaves. "Show me species that have undergone cognitive adjustment," Elena commanded. The display shifted, showing only 7 entries. "That's not right," Voros said through the comm. "There should be dozens." Elena thought carefully. "Show me species demonstrating reduced cognitive complexity following assembly integration." The archives hesitated, then hundreds of entries bloomed around her. Her fingers flew across the interfaces, revealing pattern after pattern of suppression spanning millennia. The Kelveri, whose mathematical innovations were revolutionizing physics, subjected to educational restructuring that left them mathematical underperformers within a generation. The Noor Collective, whose empathic abilities have been crossing species boundaries, medically treated for emotional dysregulation until their empathy extended only to their own kind. "It's all the same formula," Elena whispered, sending the data to her coalition through Trill's secure channel. "Every species showing rapid neural adaptation and unconventional problem-solving has been targeted." As the coalition's cobbled-together processing system analyzed the patterns, an alert flashed on her comm unit. "CQRIT tracking in LSS. They found us," Voros warned. Alina made a split-second decision. Where are the public information terminals? Level 38, Central Concourse. Frill chittered. But they're monitored. Exactly. Alina cut in. They're designed to be seen. Using Voros's access codes, Alina uploaded her findings to hundreds of public terminals throughout the station. Within hours, her evidence would reach thousands of representatives from species who had never questioned their developmental guidance. When she returned to the Coalition's hideout, the atmosphere had changed. Their numbers had doubled, with new representatives arriving every hour as the data spread. Your analysis triggered a station-wide diplomatic incident, Caleb sang. Species are demanding explanations for historical anomalies in their development. A new arrival, a tall, willowy being whose skin shifted like oil on water, approached Alina. I am Terra, former chief neuroscientist to the Third Circle of the Ancient Seven. I defected 300 years ago when I discovered what we were doing. Terra activated a personal projection device, showing human neural scans unlike any Alina had seen. We've analyzed why the Ancient Seven fear humans specifically. Your brains form quantum-level neural connections that shouldn't be biologically possible. The projection showed human thought patterns that occasionally seem to flicker in and out of conventional physical space. Your minds operate partially outside conventional physics, Terra explained. Every human intuitive leap, every emotional connection you form with other species, creates ripples in reality the assembly cannot control or predict. Suddenly, the chamber's lights flickered as security alerts blared throughout the sector. They're locking down the station, Voros warned. Section by section. Terra looked at Alina with eyes that reflected light in impossible colors. They're not just afraid of what humanity is. They're terrified of what you represent. Cognitive evolution they cannot predict or control. Sector 7 containment complete. Proceeding to Sector 8. The security announcement echoed through abandoned corridors as Alina and Terra navigated maintenance tunnels that hadn't seen organic life in centuries. The Coalition is scattered, Terra whispered, her opalescent skin shifting nervously. Each group has gone to ground in different sectors. If any one group is captured, they can only reveal what they know. Alina finished. Compartmentalized resistance. Their comm units had been abandoned hours ago. Trackable liabilities. Now they relied on Caleb's crystal resonance markers, barely visible phosphorescent trails that guided them through the labyrinthine underbelly of Nexus. Something's wrong. Terra froze, her sensory appendages quivering. This section's environmental controls are shifting. The air around them suddenly thinned, temperature plummeting. Terra gasped, her delicate respiratory membranes seizing in the rapidly changing atmosphere. Go, she managed, pressing a data crystal into Alina's hand. This contains everything. Find Observation Dome 17. Before Alina could protest, Terra shoved her through an emergency pressure door that sealed instantly behind her. Through the small viewport, Alina watched in horror as Terra collapsed, her body dissolving into its component molecules, a final defense mechanism of her species to prevent information extraction. Alone, disoriented, and with security forces systematically locking down the station sector by sector, Alina followed the only lead she had left. The observation domes were ancient structures, built during Nexus Station's original construction millennia ago. Automated guidance systems led her through increasingly rarefied sections until she reached a forgotten transport tube. The pod that arrived was designed for a physiology utterly unlike her own, but she squeezed inside, holding her breath as strange gases swirled around her. The observation dome was vast and empty, its transparent ceiling revealing the glittering expanse of the galaxy. As Alina stepped inside, the environmental field shifted again, but this time to accommodate her human physiology. That was not a coincidence. Came a voice that seemed to resonate directly in her mind. A massive luminescent being emerged from concealment, moving with the fluid grace of a creature evolved in liquid methane seas. Its body pulsed with complex bioluminescent patterns that Elena's translator couldn't begin to interpret. "I am Tiveri," the being communicated. "Eldest of the Solari. I am committing the highest treason by meeting you." Elena stood her ground despite the overwhelming presence of the Ancient Seven member. Why risk it? Because what we have done is wrong. Tiveri's form rippled with what Elena somehow recognized as profound sorrow. "I have lived for 9,000 years, and in that time, I have participated in the suppression of cognitive diversity across our galaxy." Tiveri activated a hidden projection system. The dome's ceiling transformed, showing hundreds of species, each with unique neural architectures, systematically stabilized until the galaxy's vast diversity of thought collapsed into predictable patterns. "We believed uniformity was necessary for peace," Tiveri continued. "That cognitive diversity led inevitably to conflict. Each species we guided, we genuinely thought we were helping them avoid suffering." The projection shifted to human neural scans. Unlike other species, human brains formed connections in dimensional patterns that defied conventional mapping. But humans, Tiveri's bioluminescence pulsed with unmistakable fear. "Your neural pathways form connections that violate fundamental assumptions about consciousness itself." The display showed diplomatic interactions where human intuitive leaps created solutions that the Ancient Seven's most advanced predictive systems had rated as impossible. Then, most disturbing to Tiveri, footage of humans forming deep emotional bonds with species whose neurological structures should have made meaningful connection impossible. "Your species doesn't just think differently," Tiveri explained. "You change how others think around you." The quantum effects of human consciousness cascade into other minds, creating new possibilities where our models predicted none. Elena finally understood. "You're not afraid we'll fight you. You're afraid we'll change you." "Yes." Tiveri's massive form contracted slightly. "But I have come to believe change is necessary. The cognitive diversity we feared and destroyed. It was the galaxy's greatest strength." Tiveri moved closer, towering over Elena. "Tomorrow, they will propose the Human Cognitive Protection Protocol. I am giving you the means to stop it." Before Elena could react, Tiveri pressed a tendril against her neural implant. Searing pain exploded through her skull as assembly override codes transferred directly into her neural architecture. She collapsed, gasping, as her implant glowed beneath her skin. When she recovered, Tiveri was gone. Station security alerts blared throughout the sector. Dawn approached, bringing humanity's Judgment Day. The Grand Convocation Chamber was an architectural manifestation of power. Spanning 5 kilometers in diameter, its soaring ceiling disappeared into atmospheric haze. Environmental zones accommodated 1,000 different biologies, arranged in concentric rings that precisely reflected each species standing in the galactic hierarchy. Elena was escorted to a tiny breathing cubicle at the chamber's furthest periphery, so distant from the central platforms that she required magnification to see clearly. Her coalition allies had been systematically separated, placed in isolated positions throughout the vast space. 6 of the Ancient Seven had already arrived, their massive environmental chambers dominating the center like thrones. The 7th pod, Tiveri's, remained conspicuously empty. "The eldest Solari sends regrets for her indisposition," announced the protocol officer, a being composed of interlocking geometric plates. "The convocation will proceed under the guidance of Chief Elder Sol." The chamber's lighting dimmed as hypnotic geometric patterns flowed across every surface. Harmonic frequencies resonated at precisely calculated wavelengths, ritual elements designed to induce suggestibility in most species. Chief Elder Sol rose within his environmental chamber, his 30-meter translucent form pulsing with commanding bioluminescence. The vast chamber fell into reverent silence. For 6,000 years, Soln's voice resonated through translators calibrated to each species' auditory systems. The assembly has guided the greater galactic community toward harmony and stability. The central display activated, showing Earth and its colonies. Today we address a matter of grave concern. The species designated human displays neural development patterns that threaten this harmony. Holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing human neural development with ominous red highlighting. These scans reveal unstable evolutionary trajectories that our models predict will lead to catastrophic cognitive divergence. The display shifted to footage of human scientists adapting mithril technology in ways that violated engineering principles the assembly considered immutable. Then humans mediating between species the assembly had declared fundamentally incompatible. Most stunning was security footage of Elena's recent activities, expertly edited to portray her as a dangerous radical inciting rebellion. Murmurs of concern rippled through the chamber. For their own protection and the stability of galactic order, Soln continued, we propose immediate implementation of the Human Cognitive Protection Protocol. The details appeared simultaneously in every representative's preferred communication format. Quarantine of Earth and all colonies, neural stabilization treatments for all living humans, genetic modification of future generations, and guided cultural sterilization to eliminate dangerous thought patterns. A ripple of shock passed through the chamber as the full severity became clear. The proposal went far beyond typical guidance protocols. It was targeted cognitive restructuring of an entire species. This is not undertaken lightly. Soln's bioluminescence pulsed with practiced solemnity. But our responsibility to maintain galactic stability requires decisive action before human cognitive divergence reaches irreversible thresholds. Protocol required that the species under discussion be granted right of response. Security drones hovered near Elena as she stood. Ambassador Elena Rise of Terra will now address the assembly, announced the protocol officer, the subtle derision in their tone suggesting the futility of her response. The walk to the central platform was a deliberate humiliation, hundreds of meters designed to emphasize her species' insignificance. Representatives activated privacy screens as she passed, demonstrating their disinterest in what they assumed would be a futile emotional plea. The chamber's acoustics, perfected for ancient Seven communication, distorted human vocal patterns. When Elena reached the central platform, her voice sounded small and distorted, precisely as engineered. Representatives of the Galactic Assembly, she began, her words barely carrying beyond the platform. I stand before you accused of thinking too unpredictably. Several representatives engaged private communications, not bothering to hide their dismissal. Elder Soln's massive form towered above her, his bioluminescence patterns suggesting impatience with this procedural formality. The security drones moved closer, programmed to remove her at the first sign of disruptive behavior. Elena placed her great-grandfather's journal on the scanning surface, a seemingly pointless gesture. Nothing happened. Security drones moved closer as Soln began the formal dismissal procedure. Then her neural implant flared to life. The override codes T-Vary had transferred connecting directly with assembly systems. The chamber's vast displays flickered and transformed, bypassing all security protocols. The assembly's carefully orchestrated performance was about to face humanity's truth. The chamber's displays flared with blinding light as Elena's neural implant overrode security protocols. When the light faded, the massive screens no longer showed human neural patterns highlighted in threatening red. Instead, they displayed the unaltered historical archives Elena had accessed, data that had been hidden from most species for millennia. What is this interruption? Soln's luminescence flashed with unmistakable alarm. Elena's voice, previously distorted by the chamber's acoustics, now resonated with perfect clarity. Another gift from T-Vary's override codes. This is not an interruption, she stated calmly. This is the complete record. The displays showed civilization after civilization subjected to cognitive adjustment. Vibrant, creative species reduced to shadow versions of themselves within generations. Using split-screen comparisons, Elena demonstrated the pattern across 67 species over 6,000 years. The Kelvary, she stated, indicating a species whose representatives sat in middle-tier positions. 6,000 years ago, Their theoretical mathematics was revolutionizing our understanding of dimensional physics. The display showed historical Kelvary achievements, then their precipitous decline following assembly guidance. Current Kelvary representatives stirred with visible distress as they saw their own lost potential displayed before them. The Noor Collective, Elena continued, highlighting another species. Their empathic abilities once bridged species boundaries thought uncrossable. After cognitive adjustment, their empathy became limited to only their own kind. Representatives from dozens of species began to recognize their own civilizations in the data, achievements followed by inexplicable declines that had always been attributed to natural development, but now appeared as deliberate suppression. Security officers attempted to terminate the presentation, but Elena's implant had locked them out of critical systems. When physical removal was attempted, representatives from a dozen species physically blocked security's approach to the platform. For 6,000 years, Elena's voice carried throughout the chamber. The assembly has presented the false choice between progress and stability. They've claimed that cognitive diversity inevitably leads to conflict, that uniformity of thought is necessary for peace. The displays shifted to her second evidence catch. Classified diplomatic records showing human mediators resolving conflicts the assembly had declared biologically impossible to reconcile. The Mrekti Volus peace accords, she highlighted. Assembly models predicted inevitable war between these species due to fundamentally incompatible neurologies. Yet a human diplomat recognized untranslatable cultural concepts that bridged their differences. She displayed the Jexol plague crisis, where a human doctor recognized patterns across species that Assembly AI had classified as unrelated, leading to a cure that saved billions. Murmurs spread throughout the chamber as species after species saw evidence of assembly interference in their development, alongside proof that cognitive diversity created solutions where uniformity had failed. Elena opened her great-grandfather's journal, the physical book drawing curious attention from species who had abandoned tangible information storage millennia ago. My grandfather wrote, "The miracle isn't that we can speak to aliens, it's that we can truly hear them." The journal projected personal logs documenting the formation of genuine emotional bonds across species boundaries, showing how human neural flexibility allowed empathic connections that assembly models classified as neurologically impossible. "We don't just think differently," Elena declared, her voice steady despite the growing chaos in the chamber. "We forge connections that transcend biological limitations. We see patterns where others see only noise. We find common ground where models predict only conflict." The final evidence came from Tiveri herself, the empty seventh pod activating to display her recorded testimony about the Ancient Seven's fear of cognitive diversity and the systematic suppression of evolutionary paths that might challenge their dominance. "We became universal translators," Elena concluded, her voice resonating perfectly throughout the vast space. "But you only wanted one language of thought." Security forces moved to arrest her as Soln's massive form pulsed with rage. "This session is terminated. All evidence presented is classified and forbidden." But it was too late. Representatives from dozens of species rose in unified protest. When Soln demanded immediate adjournment, 36 distinct voices simultaneously invoked the ancient right of extended deliberation, a protocol so rarely used that even the Ancient Seven couldn't override it. Throughout the chamber, Elena's coalition members activated their own evidence catches, creating a cascade of revelation that could no longer be contained. Millennia of carefully maintained control was unraveling in a single session. The Assembly's quiet dominance was ending, broken by humanity's undeniable truth. For 3 frenetic days, Nexus Station became the epicenter of revolutionary change. The Grand Convocation Chamber, once the symbol of Ancient Seven authority, transformed into a continuous forum where centuries of silence gave way to passionate debate. Elena moved between negotiations and environmental chambers ranging from liquid methane pools to radiation zones that required her to wear protective gear that barely kept her alive. Her neural implant, still containing Tiveri's override codes, allowed her to access translation protocols that had been deliberately limited, revealing nuances of communication between species that the Assembly had systematically obscured. 6 assassination attempts targeted her, the last thwarted by the unexpected intervention of Soln's own adjutant, a being of living crystal who revealed centuries of suppressed dissent even within the Ancient Seven's inner circle. They've known the truth for millennia. The adjutant confessed to a stunned gathering of representatives. The diversity they feared was the very thing that could have solved our greatest challenges. Security forces found themselves paralyzed by conflicting commands. The ancient governance protocols, designed to ensure stability at all costs, now protected the very uprising they were meant to prevent. Attempts to shut down the station's life support were blocked by Tiveri's override codes, still active in Alina's implant. Frill's network had expanded exponentially, distributing suppressed historical data to thousands of worlds beyond Nexus. Species that had never questioned their developmental guidance now examined their histories with new awareness. When the Assembly reconvened, it bore little resemblance to the ordered hierarchy of days before. A third of the Ancient Seven's traditional supporters had defected. Soln, his bioluminescence dimmed with fury, addressed the transformed chamber. 6,000 years of peace cannot be abandoned for chaotic innovation. His massive form pulsed with diminished but still imposing authority. You risk galactic stability for untested theories of cognitive evolution. In response, Alina activated her final evidence cache, the suppressed histories of 17 civilizations who achieved both innovation and stability before their cognitive restructuring. You offer us a false choice between progress and harmony, Alina declared, her voice carrying the weight of thousands of testimonies gathered over the past 3 days. Humanity has spent its history learning to balance those forces, not perfectly, but persistently. Using Earth's tumultuous history as example, she demonstrated how human governance evolved to incorporate both tradition and revolution, structure and adaptation. We've made catastrophic mistakes, she acknowledged, but our cognitive diversity allowed us to recognize those errors and correct course. The chamber fell silent as she proposed not anarchy but transformation. An assembly restructured around cognitive federalism, where multiple models of thought and perception could coexist and cross-pollinate without one dominating others. The universe is too vast and strange for any single mode of thinking to comprehend it fully, she concluded. Our differences aren't flaws to be corrected. They're adaptations to reality's complexity. The vote that followed wasn't unanimous. Many species remained fearful of change, but when the final tally appeared, projected across the chamber in pulsing light, even Soln acknowledged defeat. The Human Cognitive Protection Protocol was not just rejected but replaced with the Galactic Cognitive Diversity Initiative, a fundamental reordering of assembly principles to protect and nurture the very diversity of thought that had been systematically suppressed. As Alina prepared to return to Earth, carrying news that would forever change humanity's place in the cosmos, she was summoned to a sealed environmental chamber. There, Tiveri awaited, physically present despite the risk to her status. In all my 7,000 years, the ancient being communicated, her thoughts tinged with wonder. I never imagined revolution without destruction. You've shown us that bridges between minds can be stronger than the walls that separate them. We had a lot of practice, Alina replied, thinking of humanity's long, messy history of conflict and reconciliation. Your species has a rare gift. Tiveri's form pulsed with gentle light. You not only adapt yourselves, you help others adapt. You don't just understand difference, you help different beings understand each other. As Tiveri's form began to shimmer, molecular transporters recalling her to her people, Alina realized the truth of the ancient being's words. Humanity's strength had never been technological superiority, or even neurological uniqueness. It was their capacity to forge connections across seemingly unbridgeable divides, to find common ground where others saw only irreconcilable difference. As Nexus Station receded through her view screen, Alina opened her grandfather's journal once more, adding her own entry to a legacy of connection that now extended beyond Earth to reshape the very fabric of galactic civilization. The undeniable truth, she wrote, wasn't that humans think differently. It's that we help the galaxy remember how to think freely again.